The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it came to every screen on Earth at the same time. Every phone, every television, every billboard, every laptop, all of them went dark for exactly 3 seconds. Then a face appeared. It was not a human face. It was made of something that looked like living glass, with sharp edges and a pale blue light glowing from deep inside. The face had no mouth, but a voice came from it anyway. The voice was cold and clear, like a bell ringing inside an empty room. "People of Earth," the voice said, "this is Vorath Sen, ambassador of the Concordance. You have been warned twice before. You ignored both warnings. This is the third and final time we will speak to you. Submit to Concordance governance. Surrender your military forces. Dismantle your orbital stations. You have 1 rotation of your planet to respond. If you do not, we will come for you. There will not be a 4th warning." The screens returned to normal, and for a long moment, the entire planet was silent. Secretary General Lena Vasquez was already underground when the message played. She sat in a bunker buried deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, surrounded by concrete walls that were 3 meters thick. Around her sat the 12 most powerful people on Earth. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and all of them were talking at once. "We have to surrender," said the diplomat from the European Federation. His face was white. "You saw what they did to the Mars colony. You saw what they did to Titan Station. We cannot fight them." He was right about one thing. 40 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the Concordance, things had gone badly from the very start. The Concordance was a coalition of over 4,000 alien species that controlled most of the galaxy. They had rules. They had a system. Agree to some of their terms, and they are not interested in negotiation. The voice that cut through the noise was calm and steady. It belonged to Admiral Kalen Reese, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He sat at the far end of the table and had not spoken until now. "The Concordance does not negotiate with species they consider inferior. They gave us a choice: submit or be destroyed. Those are the only 2 options they are offering." Vasquez looked at him. She had known Reese for 15 years. He was not a man who spoke without reason. "You said those are the only 2 options they are offering," she said carefully. "Are you suggesting there is a 3rd option they do not know about?" Reese looked around the table. Then he pressed a button on the console in front of him. The lights dimmed. A holographic image appeared above the table, a web of small satellites, thousands of them, spread across the entire solar system. They were hidden inside asteroids, buried in the rings of Saturn, drifting silently in the darkness between planets. "This is Project Aegis," Reese said. "It has been active for 31 years. Since the day the Concordance destroyed our Mars colony, we have been building something. Not a fleet, not a bigger gun, something else entirely." He zoomed in on one of the satellites. It was small, no larger than a car, but its internal structure was incredibly complex. "We call it the Veil," he said. The room was quiet. "What does it do?" asked the diplomat. Reese paused. He seemed to choose his next words very carefully. "It removes things," he said. "Not by destroying them, not by burning them or breaking them apart. It folds space around the target and pushes it out of our reality, into a place where there is no time, no light, no movement. The target does not die. It simply stops existing in any way that matters." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. "You are telling me," Vasquez said slowly, "that for 30 years we have been building a weapon that can erase things from reality." "Yes. And no one in this room knew about it. Only 3 people on Earth knew about it before today. Now there are 15. I would prefer to keep that number small." The diplomat leaned forward. "How large a target can it handle?" Reese met his eyes. "We tested it on an asteroid the size of a small city. It worked. We believe it can handle significantly more." "How much more?" "Enough. Vasquez stood up and walked to the holographic display. She studied the web of satellites, thousands of tiny dots spread across billions of kilometers of empty space. 30 years of secret work. 30 years of preparation for a moment exactly like this one. If we use this weapon, if we activate the veil against whatever fleet they send, will they ever come back? Reese held her gaze. No one who is taken by the veil comes back. Not unless we bring them back. Can we bring them back? Yes, the process is reversible, but only from our end. Vasquez nodded slowly. She looked around the table. She saw fear on every face. She understood it. She felt it herself. But she also felt something else. A cold, hard certainty that had been growing inside her for 20 years, ever since she watched the footage of the Mars colony burning. "Send our reply," she said. The communications officer looked up. "What should it say, ma'am?" "One word," Vasquez said. No. The message was sent. It traveled at the speed of light, racing outward from Earth and into the dark. It reached the Concordance relay stations within hours. It reached the High Command within a day. And somewhere, in a part of the galaxy that human eyes had never seen, a decision was made. Fleet Commander Torek Val, a scarred and ancient warrior who had crushed 17 species under his heel, received his orders. He read them once, then set them aside. He did not need to read them twice. He walked to the bridge of his flagship, a warship called the Silence of Worlds, and gave a single command. Assemble the Armada. Across Concordance space, 12,000 warships began to move. Carriers the size of mountains, dreadnoughts that could crack a planet open like an egg, fighter swarms that numbered in the millions. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy, and it had one destination: Earth. They would arrive in 3 weeks, and they expected to find a frightened, primitive species begging for mercy. The Palax Armada exited fold space just beyond the orbit of Neptune, and for a brief moment, the stars themselves seemed to disappear. 12,000 warships. That number did not begin to describe what had arrived. Each capital ship was surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels, escort cruisers, gunboats, troop transports, and repair drones. Behind them came the carriers, each one holding tens of thousands of fighter craft, packed tight in their bellies like seeds inside a fruit. And at the center of it all sat the Silence of Worlds, the flagship of Fleet Commander Torek Val, a dreadnought so large that it had its own gravity. Val stood on his bridge and looked at the distant yellow dot that was Earth's sun. His body was covered in thick dark scales. He had 6 limbs, 4 legs, and 2 arms, and a face full of scars that told the story of a long and violent career. He had personally led the subjugation of 17 species. Some of them had fought. Some had begged. All of them had fallen. He expected nothing different here. "Scan the system," he ordered. His science officer, Dr. Ithal, a thin, nervous creature with 4 eyes and skin the color of wet sand, worked quickly at her console. The scan results came back within minutes. 300 human warships detected, she reported. They are forming a defensive line near the 5th planet, the gas giant they called Jupiter. Their ships are running on basic fusion drives. Weapons appear to be kinetic, railguns and missile systems. No energy shields detected. No fold space capability. Val made a sound deep in his throat. It was the closest his species came to laughter. 300 ships, he repeated. Against 12,000. Yes, Commander. This will not even be a battle. It will be an errand. He turned away from the display and looked at his officers. Begin the approach. Standard assault formation. We will be at their defensive line within 6 days. I want all weapons charged and all fighter wings ready to launch on my command. The Armada began to move. A wall of metal and light creeping through the darkness of the outer solar system. On Earth, people could see it coming. Telescopes picked up the fleet as a strange, shimmering cloud near Neptune. The news spread fast. Within hours, the streets of every major city were filled with frightened people. Some prayed, some protested, some tried to leave, though there was nowhere to go. The sky had always seemed so big, so empty, so safe. Now something terrible was filling it up. But beneath the Himalayas, in the Aegis bunker, the mood was very different. Admiral Kalen Reese stood in front of a wall of screens, each one showing a different part of the solar system. He watched the Armada's approach with the calm patience of a man who had been preparing for this moment for most of his adult life. Around him, engineers and technicians worked at their stations, running final checks on systems that had been tested 1,000 times. "Veil array status?" Reese asked. "All 10,000 nodes are online and holding," reported his chief engineer, a young woman named Captain Dara Osei. "Power reserves at full capacity. Targeting systems are calibrated and synced. We are ready, Admiral." Reese nodded, but said nothing. He had spent 30 years building this weapon. He had sacrificed a normal life for it. No family, no home, no rest. He had done it because he believed it was necessary. But now that the moment was here, he felt the weight of it pressing down on him like a stone on his chest. He picked up a secure communication device and called Secretary General Vasquez. "Ma'am, the fleet has arrived. They are moving toward the inner system. I estimate 6 days before they reach weapons range." "How is our public fleet holding up?" Vasquez asked. "Captain Torres and his 300 ships are in position near Jupiter. They know their role. They will hold the line and buy us time if needed, but I do not expect it to come to that." "And the Veil?" "Ready and waiting for your word." There was a pause on the other end. When Vasquez spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Kalen, how many people are on those ships?" Reese closed his eyes. He had already done the math. Based on concordance fleet records that our intelligence teams have obtained over the years, the Palax Armada carries approximately 4 million crew members across all vessels. 4 million. "Yes, ma'am." Another silence. "And when we activate the Veil, those 4 million people will simply cease to exist." "They will not die," Reese said carefully. "They will be displaced, removed from our space-time. They will not feel pain. They will not feel anything at all. And the process is reversible. We can bring them back. But in the moment, from their perspective, they will be nothing." "Yes." Vasquez took a long breath. "I understand. We will wait. I want to make absolutely sure that they intend to attack before we act." The days passed slowly. The Armada crossed the orbit of Uranus. Then it passed the orbit of Saturn. Earth's public fleet held its position near Jupiter. 300 small ships arranged in a thin defensive line that looked like a row of candles standing in front of a forest fire. On the 5th day, Vorath Sen, the crystalline ambassador who had delivered the final warning, sent one last private message to Secretary General Vasquez. It arrived on her personal screen in the bunker. Text only, no hologram. "Secretary General," the message read, "I am contacting you outside of official channels. I urged the High Command not to send the Armada. They did not listen. I am asking you now, one final time, surrender. I have seen worlds burn. I have watched species vanish from history. Your people are young. You have potential. Do not throw that away out of pride. Please." Vasquez read the message 3 times. Then she typed her reply. "Ambassador Sen, I thank you for your concern. It tells me that there is at least one decent soul among your people. But you misunderstand us. We are not refusing out of pride. We are refusing because we have seen what the concordance does to species that submit. You do not protect them. You cage them. You strip them of their ability to grow, to choose, to become what they were meant to become. We would rather face your Armada than live in that cage, and I promise you, we are more ready than you think." She sent the message and closed the screen. On the 6th day, the Armada reached the orbit of Jupiter. Commander Vol looked at the thin line of human ships and gave the order that everyone had been expecting. All weapons to full power. Fighter wings launch. Begin the assault. The Armada came alive. Thousands of fighter craft poured out of the carriers like a swarm of angry insects. Energy weapons began to charge, their glow visible even across the vast distances of space. The human fleet did not move. It held its position, steady and silent, like a wall that knew it could not stop the flood, but refused to step aside. In the Aegis bunker, every alarm went off at once. "They are firing, Admiral," Captain Osei reported. "The Armada has engaged." Reese picked up the communicator. His hand was steady. His voice was calm. "Secretary General, the Armada has opened fire. We are out of time. I need your authorization to activate the veil." Vasquez stood alone in her office. She could hear the alarms through the walls. She could feel the vibration of the bunker systems running at full power. She thought of the 4 million souls on those ships, soldiers following orders, technicians doing their jobs, officers who believed they were bringing order to a dangerous galaxy. She closed her eyes. She took one breath. "Activate the veil," she said. In the darkness of space, 10,000 hidden satellites woke up at exactly the same moment. They had been sleeping for years, buried in asteroids, drifting among the rings of planets, hiding in the cold, empty spaces where no one ever looked. Now they came alive, and the fabric of space around the solar system began to change. Something was about to happen that the galaxy had never seen before. And Commander Torek Vol, standing on the bridge of the most powerful warship ever built, felt something he had not felt in 40 years of war. The first sign that something was wrong came from the sensors. Dr. Ithal, the science officer aboard the Silence of Worlds, was watching the data streams from the Armada's forward scanners when the numbers stopped making sense. Energy readings were climbing, not from the human fleet, not from any single point, but from everywhere at once. It was as if the empty space around them had suddenly started producing power on its own. "Commander," she said, and her voice had a sharpness to it that made Vol turn around immediately. "I am detecting an energy surge across the entire local region of space. The source is not any ship. It appears to be coming from thousands of small devices hidden throughout the solar system." "What kind of devices?" "I do not know. They were not visible on any previous scan. They appear to have been shielded until this moment." Her 4 eyes blinked rapidly as she studied the data. "Commander, the readings are unlike anything in our database. This is not a weapon signature. It is not thermal, kinetic, or electromagnetic. The energy pattern is spatial. The geometry of local space is changing." Vol felt the hair on the back of his neck rise, a reaction his species had carried for millions of years, a warning from deep inside the body that something dangerous was near. He had learned long ago to trust that feeling. "All ships, raise shields to maximum," he commanded. "Fighter wings, return to formation. All weapons hold fire." "Commander?" His tactical officer looked confused. "We are in the middle of an assault. The human fleet is directly ahead." "I said hold fire," Vol roared. He turned back to Ithal. "What is happening to space? Explain it to me in simple terms." Ithal's hands were shaking as they moved across her console. "The best way I can describe it, Commander, is that the space around us is being folded, like a piece of cloth being pinched together. The distances between points are changing. The shape of reality itself is being rewritten. Can we jump to fold space? Can we retreat?" Ithal ran the calculation. Her face went pale. "No, Commander. Fold space requires stable local geometry. Whatever is happening has made it impossible to open a fold space corridor. We are locked in place. For the first time in his career, Torek Val had no orders to give. He stood on his bridge, surrounded by the most advanced technology in the galaxy, commanding the most powerful fleet ever assembled, and he had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. Then it happened. It started at the edges of the Armada. The outermost ships, a ring of escort cruisers guarding the flanks, simply stopped being there. There was no explosion, there was no flash of light, there was no sound, because sound does not travel in space. One moment, the ships existed, and the next moment, they did not. They did not break apart. They did not fly away. They were just gone, as if someone had erased them from a photograph. Then the next ring of ships vanished, and the next, and the next. It moved inward like a wave, silent and unstoppable. Carriers holding 50,000 fighter craft disappeared between one heartbeat and the next. Dreadnoughts that could survive a direct hit from a star's energy output were simply removed from existence. The fighter swarms, millions of small, fast ships that had been pouring toward the human fleet, blinked out of reality like sparks falling into water. On the bridge of the Silence of Worlds, the crew watched in horror as the fleet around them vanished. The tactical display, which had been glowing with 12,000 green dots, was going dark. Dot after dot after dot, winking out faster than the eye could follow. What is this? What is this? No one answered him. There was no answer to give. Ithal stared at her screens. Tears were running down her face, though she did not seem to notice. "They are being folded," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Pushed out of normal space into a compressed dimensional pocket. They have not been destroyed. They have been removed, taken out of our universe, and placed somewhere else, somewhere with no time, no energy, no dimension. They are not dead. They are simply not here anymore." The wave reached the Silence of Worlds. Val felt the ship shudder. He looked through the forward viewport and saw the stars begin to stretch and bend, as if the universe itself was being pulled like soft candy. The light around him changed color, blue, then white, then a shade of nothing that his eyes had no name for. He opened his mouth to give one final order, but the words never came. The bridge folded. The ship folded. Reality folded around him like a hand closing into a fist. And then there was nothing. Not darkness, not silence, not emptiness, just nothing. The absence of everything, including the absence itself. The Palix Armada, the greatest military force in the history of the galaxy, was gone. 12,000 warships, 4 million crew members, gone in less than 30 seconds, without a single shot being fired in return. In the Aegis bunker beneath the Himalayas, Admiral Kalen Reese watched it happen on his screens. The wall of red signatures that had represented the Armada, thousands of angry red dots filling the display from edge to edge, flickered once and then went dark. All of them, at the same time. The screen was empty. The solar system was empty. There was nothing left but Earth's own 300 ships, still holding their position near Jupiter, and the cold, quiet dark of space. The bunker was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. A technician near the back of the room had his hand over his mouth. Captain Osei was gripping the edge of her console so hard that her knuckles had turned white. "It worked," someone whispered. Rice did not celebrate. He did not smile. He sat down in his chair slowly, like a man who had just been told something he already knew, but had hoped was not true. He pressed his hands flat on the table and stared at the empty screen. "God help us," he said quietly, "for what we have just shown the galaxy." 30 minutes later, Dr. Maren Solberg arrived in the bunker. She was the woman who had built the Veil, a physicist so brilliant that only a handful of people on Earth could understand her work. She was 52 years old, with wild gray hair and the look of someone who had not slept properly in months. She walked into Vasquez's office without knocking, and sat down without being asked. "Tell me," Vasquez said. "The Armada has been displaced into a folded space-time pocket. It exists outside of our observable universe. Inside the pocket, there is no entropy, no movement of energy, no passage of time, no physical processes of any kind. The crew members are not dead. Their bodies are intact. Their minds are intact. But they are experiencing nothing. No thought, no sensation, no awareness. It is not sleep. It is not a coma. It is the complete absence of experience. Are they suffering? No. Suffering requires awareness. They have none. They simply are not, in any way that has meaning. And this is reversible? Yes, we can open the pocket and pull them back into normal space at any time. From their perspective, no time will have passed. They will not remember anything, because there will be nothing to remember." Vasquez leaned back in her chair and pressed her fingers against her eyes. 4 million people, she said. "We just erased 4 million people from reality," Solberg repeated. "We can bring them back." "I know. But right now, in this moment, they do not exist. We did that. We chose that." Solberg did not argue. She had been carrying this weight for years, ever since she first understood what her invention could do. She had built the veil because she believed it was the only way to save humanity. She still believed that. But belief did not make the weight any lighter. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, alarms were screaming in the Concordance High Command. Every communication channel to the Palix Armada had gone dead at exactly the same moment. No distress signals, no final transmissions. 12,000 ships had simply stopped sending data, as if someone had flipped a switch and turned off reality. Vorath Sen stood in the high command chamber and watched as the old commanders and politicians scrambled and shouted and demanded explanations that no one could give. He said nothing. He simply stood there, his crystalline body glowing with a dim, sad light, and thought about the message Lena Vasquez had sent him. She had told him they were ready. He had not believed her. Now, for the first time in 60,000 years of Concordance history, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy knew what it felt like to be afraid. Not angry, not insulted, not inconvenienced. Afraid, truly deeply afraid. Of a species they had called primitive. Of a small blue planet they had dismissed as unimportant. Of a people who had looked at the greatest fleet in galactic history and made it disappear without a sound. The news spread across the galaxy like a disease. At first, no one believed it. The Palix Armada, 12,000 warships, the pride of Concordance military power, could not simply disappear. There had to be a mistake, a communication failure, a fold space accident, anything but the truth, because the truth was impossible. But as the hours turned into days, and the days turned into weeks, and not a single ship sent a single signal, the impossible became real. The Armada was gone. Not defeated, not retreating, gone. And the species responsible, the small, soft, short-lived creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable star, had done it without firing a single conventional weapon. The Concordance High Command fell into chaos. Vorath Sen stood before the Grand Council in the Great Chamber on the capital world of Thessar Prime. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from 4,000 species, and today, every seat was full. The air was thick with the sounds of alien languages, the smell of alien fear, and the sharp crackle of political fury. "You knew," said Grand Marshal Korath, the military leader of the war faction, pointing one massive armored finger at Sen. Korath was a creature built for intimidation, 7 feet tall, covered in bony plates, with a voice like grinding stone. "You communicated with the humans. You warned them. You gave them time to prepare." "I gave them nothing," Sen replied calmly. "They were already prepared. They have been prepared for 30 years. We simply refuse to see it. I warned this council that the humans were more dangerous than they appeared. You dismissed my concerns. You sent our greatest fleet to crush a species you did not bother to study. And now our fleet does not even have the dignity of wreckage. There is nothing left to recover, nothing left to analyze, nothing left to mourn. You made this happen. Accusations, threats. 3 different species nearly came to blows on the council floor. It took the better part of an hour to restore order. And when the shouting finally stopped, 3 distinct factions had formed. The first was the War faction led by Korath. They wanted revenge. They wanted to gather every remaining ship in Concordance space and send them to destroy Earth. Not conquer it, but burn it to ash. If ships could not do the job, they would build a weapon that could. Korath proposed the construction of a stellar ignition device, a machine capable of destabilizing Earth's sun and turning it into a bomb that would consume the entire solar system. The second was the Isolation faction. They wanted nothing to do with humanity ever again. Their plan was to seal off the Sol system permanently, surround it with warning beacons and automated defense platforms, and pretend it did not exist. Let the humans rot in their little corner of the galaxy, alone and forgotten. The third faction was the smallest, led by Vorov Sen. The Diplomacy faction argued that the only survivable path forward was negotiation. Whatever weapon the humans possessed, it was clearly beyond anything the Concordance could match. Fighting was suicide. Isolation was cowardice. The only real option was to talk. For the moment, no faction held enough power to act alone. The council argued and debated and accomplished nothing, while across the galaxy, the fear continued to grow. Intelligence agencies from a dozen species sent probe ships toward the Sol system. Not one of them returned. Spy drones, scout vessels, long-range surveillance platforms, all of them crossed an invisible line somewhere near the outer planets and simply stopped existing. The Veil Array, it seemed, was still active. Humanity had not just used its weapon once and put it away. It had left it running, turning the entire solar system into a zone that nothing could enter uninvited. The humans had locked their door, and the lock was made of something the galaxy could not break. On Earth, the mood was complicated. The public knew that an alien fleet had come, and that it had been repelled. The government did not explain how. There was no victory parade, no celebration, no triumphant announcement. Secretary General Vasquez gave a brief address to the people of Earth, in which she said that humanity's defenses had held, and that the threat had been neutralized. She did not smile when she said it. In the Aegis bunker, the people who knew the truth were struggling with what they had done. Admiral Reese began visiting Dr. Solberg's laboratory every evening. He would sit in a chair in the corner and watch her work. One night, 3 weeks after the Armada's disappearance, he asked her the question that had been eating at him. What is it like in there? In the pocket dimension? What are they experiencing? Solberg pushed her glasses up her nose and turned to face him. She looked exhausted. I have run simulations, she said. Thousands of them. The answer is always the same. There is no experience inside the pocket. No thought, no dreams, no darkness. The concept of experience itself does not exist there. Time is not passing for them. They are not waiting. They are not trapped. They simply are not. That sounds like death. It is not death. Death is an ending. This is not an ending. It is a pause, an infinite pause. If we pull them out tomorrow, they will wake up exactly as they were, mid-thought, mid-breath. They will not know that anything happened. But if we never pull them out, Solberg was quiet for a long time. Then they remain in that state until the heat death of the universe, which is, I suppose, its own kind of ending, just a very slow one. Reese rubbed his face with his hands. We built a weapon that is worse than killing, he said. At least the dead are at peace. These people are frozen in a void that we created, and we did it to 4 million of them. Solberg did not disagree. Secretary General Vasquez spent those weeks in meeting after meeting, trying to chart a path forward. She proposed something she called the Lazarus Protocol, a plan to eventually release the Armada's crew, one ship at a time, under carefully controlled conditions. The crew would be disarmed, informed of what had happened, and returned to Concordance space. Many of her advisors opposed the idea. "They would have killed us," said General Torres, the commander of Earth's public fleet. "They came here to destroy our planet and enslave our species. Why should we show them mercy?" "Because if we do not," Vasquez replied, "then we become exactly what they said we were. Dangerous, unstable, a threat that needs to be controlled. I will not prove them right." The debate continued unresolved until a message arrived that changed everything. It came from a species called the Fen, small insectoid creatures no larger than a human child, with delicate wings and large dark eyes. The Fen had been part of the Concordance for 9,000 years. They had not joined willingly. They had been conquered, their homeworld occupied, their culture suppressed, their people forced to serve as traders and laborers for the larger, more powerful species that ruled the coalition. The Fen envoy's name was Chirik. He arrived at the edge of the Sol system in a tiny, unarmed trading ship, and broadcast a message in broken but understandable English. "People of Earth, my name is Chirik. I speak for the Fen. We are not your enemy. We have been prisoners of the Concordance for longer than your species has existed. We watched what you did to the Armada. We are not afraid of you. We are amazed by you. We would like to talk, if you will allow it." Vasquez authorized his entry through the veil. Chirik's ship passed through the barrier without harm, the first alien vessel to do so, and docked at Earth's orbital station. When the small winged creature stepped off his ship and stood before the human delegation, he looked up at the tall, strange beings around him and said something that would be remembered for centuries. "For 9,000 years, we waited for someone in the galaxy to stand up to them. Every conquered species hoped, every generation prayed. No one ever did. Until you." He bowed his small head. "We are here to help, and we bring information. The Concordance War faction is building a weapon. They estimate it will be ready in 1 year." The room went cold. Vasquez looked at Reese. Reese looked at Solberg, and all three of them understood the same thing at the same moment. 1 year. The war was not over. It had only just begun. The year that followed was the busiest in human history. Through Chirik and the Fen network, Earth gained something it had never had before: eyes inside Concordance space. The Fen were traders. They traveled everywhere, spoke to everyone, and were considered so small and unimportant that no one bothered to watch what they were doing. It was the perfect cover. Within weeks, Fen operatives were feeding Earth a steady stream of intelligence about the stellar ignition device, the weapon the Concordance was building to destroy the Sun. The device was being constructed at a fortress station called Cathara Prime, deep in the core territory of the Concordance. Cathara Prime was the size of a small moon, heavily armed, and surrounded by a defensive fleet of 2,000 ships. The entire war faction leadership had relocated there to personally oversee the project. Grand Marshal Korath had made it his home, his headquarters, and his monument to revenge. Admiral Reese studied the intelligence reports and understood 2 things. First, the Concordance had learned nothing from the Armada's disappearance. They still believed the problem could be solved with a bigger weapon. Second, and more importantly, Earth could not afford to wait. If the stellar ignition device was completed, it would be able to destroy the Sun from the other side of the galaxy. The veil could protect the solar system from ships, but it could not protect the sun from a weapon that operated on the level of stellar physics. Humanity needed to act, and it needed to act at a distance. Dr. Maren Solberg had spent the year working on exactly this problem. The original Veil Array was a defensive system. It required the target to be within the solar system, surrounded by the network of satellites. But Solberg had always known that the technology could be pushed further. In her laboratory, working 20-hour days with a small team of physicists who understood that the fate of their species depended on their success, she developed something new. She called it the Veil Lance. The principle was the same as the original Veil: fold space around the target and push it out of normal reality. But instead of using a network of satellites to create the field, the Veil Lance used a single quantum-entangled beacon placed near the target. The beacon served as an anchor point. From Earth, Solberg's team could lock onto the beacon and project the displacement field across any distance. Light years, if necessary. One beacon, one pulse, one target, removed from the universe. The problem was getting the beacon into position. Kethera Prime was the most heavily guarded location in Concordance space. No human ship could get within 1,000 light-years of it without being detected and destroyed. But a Fen trading ship, small, unremarkable, expected, could. Schirik volunteered for the mission himself. When Vasquez told him the risk, he simply tilted his head and said, "My people have lived in fear for 9,000 years. I would rather die doing something brave than live another day being afraid." The beacon was disguised as a piece of common trading equipment, small enough to fit in Chiric's hand. He carried it aboard his little ship, flew into Concordance core territory along his usual trade route, docked at a supply station near Kethera Prime, and left the beacon attached to the station's hull. It took him 11 seconds. No one noticed. He sent the confirmation signal to Earth and then flew away, his wings trembling slightly, his heart's beating fast. Back on Earth, Secretary General Vasquez convened the full council one last time. She knew what she was about to authorize. She also knew that she could not do it without first trying one more time to stop it. She recorded a message and broadcast it on every frequency that could reach Concordance space. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy, the face of the leader of a species that most aliens had never seen up close. She looked tired. She looked determined. She looked like someone who had been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time and was ready to set it down. "People of the Concordance," she said, "I am Lena Vasquez, Secretary General of the United Earth Council. I am speaking to you directly because I believe you deserve to hear the truth. 1 year ago, your Armada came to our system to destroy us. We stopped them. We did not destroy them. They are alive, held in a state of suspension, unharmed and unaware. We can return them to you. Every single one, safe and whole. We want to return them to you. But we cannot do that while you are building a weapon to murder our star. So I am making you an offer, the only offer you will receive. Dismantle the stellar ignition device. Release the species you have conquered. Allow them to govern themselves. Do these things and we will return your Armada. We will open our borders. We will talk as equals. This is not a threat. This is a hand reaching out in the darkness. Take it." The message reached Kethera Prime 6 hours later. Brand Marshal Koreth watched it in his command center, surrounded by his officers. When it finished, he gave his response, not to Earth, but to his own people. He ordered the public execution of 3 Fen diplomats who had been calling for peace. Their deaths were broadcast across Concordance space as a warning to anyone who might sympathize with the humans. When the footage reached Earth, Vasquez watched it in silence. Then she closed the screen, walked to the Aegis Command Center, and stood beside Admiral Reese. "Do it," she said. Reese gave the order. Solberg activated the Veil Lance. In her laboratory, a machine that looked almost disappointingly simple, a console, a transmitter, a quantum entangled array, sent a pulse that crossed the galaxy in an instant, following the invisible thread that connected it to the beacon on the supply station near Cathara Prime. The pulse reached the beacon amplified it, and the displacement field expanded outward, swallowing Cathara Prime and everything within 50,000 kilometers of it. On the other side of the galaxy, a fortress the size of a moon, along with its garrison, its weapon, its fleet, and every member of the war faction leadership, simply ceased to be there. No light, no sound, no shockwave. One moment it filled the sky, and the next moment there was only stars. The concordance broke. Not gracefully. It shattered like glass dropped on stone. The war faction had been the backbone of concordance power for centuries, and with its leaders gone, the entire structure collapsed. Species that had been held in line by fear suddenly had nothing to fear. Within days, rebellions erupted on 100 worlds. Conquered peoples rose up. Puppet governments fell. Communication networks fractured. The great machine that had controlled the galaxy for 60,000 years came apart at the seams. Vorath Sen stepped into the void. Moving quickly and carefully, he gathered the moderate members of the remaining council and formed a new government. It was smaller, weaker, and humbler than the old one, and that was exactly what it needed to be. He contacted Earth within a week. "Secretary General Vasquez," he said, "I accept your terms, all of them." The Lazarus Protocol began. One by one, the warships of the Palex Armada were pulled back from the dimensional pocket. Each ship appeared exactly where it had been, in the space near Jupiter, with its crew alive, unharmed, and completely unaware of what had happened. They were met by human ships, disarmed peacefully, and given a simple explanation. "The war is over. Your leaders have agreed to peace. You are going home." Most of the crews accepted it quietly. Some were confused. Some were angry. But none of them could argue with the fact that they were alive and unharmed, which was more than they had planned to offer Earth. Commander Torek Val was the last to be returned. His ship, the Silence of Worlds, appeared in normal space with its lights still on and its weapons still charged. Reese had insisted on being present for this one. He boarded the flagship with a small team and walked to the bridge. Val was standing exactly where he had been standing a year ago, mid-order, his mouth half open. He blinked. He looked around. He saw the humans standing in front of him, small, unarmed, dressed in a simple uniform. "How long?" Val asked. His voice was rough. "A little over a year," Reese replied. Val looked down at his own hands. They were unchanged, unaged. He flexed his fingers slowly, as if checking to make sure they still worked. "It felt like nothing," he said quietly. "No time, no dreams, no darkness, just nothing." He looked at Reese with something in his eyes that might have been respect, or might have been horror. "That is the most terrifying part." "I know," Reese said. "That is why we are hoping we never have to use it again." Val was returned to Concordant space with his crew. He retired from the military the same day. 6 months later, Secretary General Lena Vasquez stood at a podium in a great hall on Earth's orbital station. Before her sat representatives of 200 species, former subjects of the Concordance, who had won their freedom in the upheaval. The Fen were there, given a place of honor at the front. Chirik sat in the first row, his wings folded neatly behind him, his dark eyes bright. Vasquez looked out at the gathered faces, so different from each other, so different from her own, and spoke. "We were told to be afraid. We were told to kneel. We were told that the galaxy had no place for a species like us. Too young, too violent, too stubborn. Maybe they were right about the stubborn part." Laughter rippled through the hall. She smiled. "We built our weapon not because we wanted power, but because we refused to be erased. And now we offer the galaxy the same thing we fought for, the right to exist on your own terms. We will not rule you. We will not conquer you. We will simply make sure that no one else does either. The door is open. The age of cages is over. The hall erupted in sound. Cheers, clicks, whistles, hums, each species expressing joy in its own way. Shirik rose to his feet and spread his wings wide, and the other Fen in the hall did the same, filling the room with a soft, shimmering light. Vasquez stepped back from the podium. Reese was waiting in the wings. She walked over to him and let out a long, slow breath. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. Reese looked out at the hall full of free people, free species, and free futures. "I think it has a chance," he said. "And a year ago, we did not even have that. It was enough." And deep in the archives of Project Aegis, filed away in a folder that only 3 people could access, Dr. Maren Solberg had left a final note on the original Veil research file. It read, "The Veil is a mirror. It shows the universe what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. May we never need to show them again." The galaxy entered a new era. They called it the Open Age. And at its center, quiet and watchful, stood a small blue planet that had refused to kneel. Earth.